thank you for being here in our Congress, our first Congress in Madrid.
My pleasure.
And also in this special Café coaching. I was hearing your conference about the strategic thinking and the roles and knowledge that coaches, executive coaches need to have a process with a client. What are the boundaries between coaching and consulting? Because sometimes if you try to get all this knowledge and talk about this knowledge with the client, maybe there is the risk of crossing those boundaries and telling the client what to do.
Well, most people talk about boundaries as if the boundary was a bright line in the sand or a very firm boundary. You come up against it like it's a wall and you don't cross. In reality, boundaries are fluid. And so when you think about the role of the coach, the role of the consultant, the role of the leader, they all share certain duties, certain responsibilities. They share certain knowledge. They share certain common skills, and then there are skills and knowledge and interests that are unique to each of the three of them. If you're in a coaching role and you understand a great deal about consulting, that boundary gets expanded because you know more, you're more competent, you can go in depth with a leader in different ways. If you're a coach and you've sat in a leadership position, and so you've had the responsibility for formulating strategy, that boundary gets even wider. So you're more competent and more confident about being able to go in more deeply with a client about the issues of strategy. If you're just starting out as a coach and you are working with a leader in an organization and he or she tells you, I'm worried about whether we have the right strategy, and you have no knowledge about that, you've never worked in or around organizational strategy, then as a coach, as a professional, you should be able to say, that's a boundary for me. I'm going to have to help you figure out who else you can talk to around those issues. And I may be able to talk to you about other aspects, not the strategy per se, but what are you experiencing in the strategy formation? If I know something about group dynamics, how are you managing your team? What aspects of your personality, what skills are you accessing, where are you struggling? All of that may be in the purview of the coach who doesn't have these other experiences. And they can stay well within what you can think of as their professional boundaries, what their knowledge, skills, abilities, and experiences are, and they don't cross over those boundaries. But the more you know, the more competent you are, the more fluid the boundaries can actually be.
All right. Talking about strategic thinking is bound with systemic thinking also. The CEO, the director, as a systemic and inside a system. What are your experience, or do you have any research about reaching that strategic thinking in that process, strategic process, and affecting the psychological and personal issues of the director of the client?
Well, to begin with, if you're a coach, you have to know something about general systems theory and how it's applied to organizations. And if the more you know, the more you're able to inquire of a client what he or she is thinking about, what their models are. I will frequently, for example, ask clients what's their theory of leadership. I will ask them what's their theory of organization. If they're able to articulate a theory of leadership and a theory of organization, because I've been a student, I will know something about where they fit in on a wide continuum of theories of leadership, of management practice, of organization. And I may know something about what they don't know, what they may be misapplying. And so in the process of coaching, I can find out whether they've put their heads in a smaller box and they need to be in a bigger box, or they're in too big a box and they need to go here or they need to go there, to expand their thinking. I don't have to tell them what to think. I don't have to tell them what the strategy is. But if I know the way they think, if I know how they're conceiving or conceptualizing their organization or how they go to market, I can often make some determinations about where I'll be helpful. If you don't have those backgrounds and that knowledge yourself, it's going to be more difficult for you to first make an assessment, and then second, know where and how to make an intervention with a client that may help them broaden their own knowledge, their own ideas, or their what you can think of as alternatives in the way in which they're pursuing a business strategy. It's also very useful to remember that when we're working on one-on-one with coaching clients, we're often privileged to know how they're actually feeling and their actual thoughts about people, about process, about bosses, about money. And so as coaches, we often get on the inside of the more personal aspects. It's less about the formal strategy than how is the CEO trying to get these strategic pieces, for example, through a board of directors meeting where he has opponents on the board of directors, and how he's trying to influence and manage what you can think of as the strategic alliances on the board. It may have less to do with the strategy, more to do with the management of the group dynamics or the politics of the situation that you can be very, very comfortable with. Or it could be, I'm depending on this particular person who's in my organization to produce these reports and to help me with the strategy, and the person's underperforming. So you're going to work with the CEO around, well, why is the person underperforming? How are you managing that person so that you're going to get the performance so that you can formulate the strategy? It's so interlocked, there's so many dimensionalities that when we say we're doing strategic work or working on strategy with leaders, it can go all over the place.
We have the awareness of how the coaching, the executive coaching needs a lot of skills, a lot of knowledge, and also to have a clear motivation in this discipline. How the different roles or different functions, skills from counseling, consulting, coaching can get together to help directors and CEOs to a better understanding for to solve their problems or to get their objectives?
This is a very, very good question, a very difficult question. I think we're at the end of the opening phase of executive coaching. I think what we've done over the last 25 or 30 years is to demonstrate in practice, and now increasingly in research, that coaching activities with leaders can have impacts on them in their ability to improve their performance as leaders. We also have the beginnings of research and practice experience that says if a leader gets better at doing his or her job, the organization actually gets better.
For sure.
So we're connecting coaching and leadership to organizational performance. In some places, institutions, universities, professional organizations, entrepreneurial organizations are beginning to develop programs to train coaches. There is no, that I know of, formal curriculum that's been widely adopted in terms of either the United States or Europe or Asia that says this is what an executive coach should know, this is what they should know how to do, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, what we have is phenomenal growth. So, for example, in the 1980s and the 1990s across the world, you may have had a couple of thousand people doing this kind of work. In 2011, across the world, you probably have 20 to 30,000 people doing this kind of work, depending on the way you count it. Not all of them are as well qualified or as experienced as the people who basically founded the field and learned how to do this. We are getting to a place where people want to become executive coaches, and they want to go to congresses, they want to go to university, they want to find out how to be an executive coach. I think in the next 10, 15, 20 years, you're going to see universities evolve curriculum that will say, first experimentally, but increasingly tied to research, you should know this, you should know this, you should know this, you should know that. You should be able to do the following. Right now, depending on who you talk to, those curricula are all over the place. There's no real, you can't go and somebody says, here's the curriculum, do this, you'll be qualified to be an executive coach. When people ask me, the first thing I tell them to do is go and get some experience leading something. If you can be a manager in a business, if you can run your own business, fine. If not, go and volunteer to be on the board of a not-for-profit organization. Go and be on a committee in your professional association and volunteer to be the chairperson of that committee. Learn how you can help change human beings' behavior, how you can get groups of human beings actually to do work, because that's the work of leadership, that's the work of executives. If you haven't done that yourself, it's hard for you to sit with somebody who's paid to do it, who's doing it every day, and to have confidence that, well, I have some counseling skills, or I know something about organizational change, or I know something about management, but if that person turns to you and says, what do I do? If you don't know what questions to ask, if you don't know what the basic issues are because you haven't been there, you're going to be first less successful, and second, you're going to be less confident in that situation. But we don't have curriculum, we don't have practicum where somebody says, well, I want to be an executive coach, so you can go and you can practice being a leader for 2 years as you learn the following coaching skills. We don't have that. We have lots of programs that say, well, come and take this series of workshops, and at the end of the workshops, you'll be qualified to be an executive coach. No, no. As I said downstairs in my lecture, I started managing people the day after I graduated from, I finished my degree. And I had 13 full-time people that I was responsible for in a budget. So how did I learn to do executive coaching? By failing a lot as a manager.
On your experience, what do you think are the most difficult issues that an executive coach can find inside a multinational organization?
You're asking very good questions. So I would just put 2 or 3 out there. I think the most challenging one for a coach is when you have a client that is underdeveloped as a person. As a person. A word that I use in my new book is the corrupt. So if you're working with a client who is cowardly, if you're working with a client who tends to be systematically intemperate, can't regulate their own behavior, if you're working with a client who whose view of humanity, of people in general, is unjust, who treats people irreverently or tends to do stupid things, you got a big job to do. And unfortunately, in many global businesses, some of the people who get promoted into senior positions, into management positions, have certain features of their characters where they are underdeveloped in these areas. In businesses, for example, depending on the nature of the business, we tend to promote people who are interested in money. And so if you're a person who is solely interested, or your primary motive or value is money, you're going to make decisions in certain kinds of ways, you're going to treat people in certain kinds of ways than if you had a relatively broader value structure. So when you're working with a client, you have to investigate what their value structure is, and you may find them limited. And so part of the work of coaching is discover what those value structures are, how that translates to their behavior, and then are they underperforming? Are they not as effective as they could be because of those value structures or the behaviors that are related to them? So we now see in, just for example, the global economy, you see an economic meltdown that was driven largely by greed by a small group of people associated with financial institutions whose values about humanity, about society, tended to take a back seat way in the back, which led to poor judgment, poor performance, and massive dislocation, massive unemployment, just humongous problems. So that's probably number one. The second is that you will find people who are very good technically, but their skills interpersonally and in managing a group of being able to get a group of people to work effectively together is not anywhere near what it needs to be. So they can talk to you one-on-one about what it is they want to do or are trying to do with the organization, but getting a good team of executives around them, getting that team well organized so that they can actually execute on a strategic agenda, they fall down repeatedly because they're not able to orchestrate those kinds of activities. And it's a very different set of skills than I want to take the organization in this strategic direction. Being able to say that and have that is very different than being able to get a group of people working around you that can take a whole organization forward. I would say then the third area that's related to the first two is how executives influence other people. How they influence down the chain of command. It's easier for them because they have authority and they can put a lot of pressure down the chain of command. But the higher up you go in organizations, increasingly it's not about downward pressure. It's about how you work across the multiple silos of an organization. And in all of those management positions, it's how you work up, how you influence up. And in every case that I work with, usually one of the issues that I'm focusing with them on is how they strategically influence the people up above them. So in the work that I do, I would say those are the three primary kinds of arenas, and then they tend to meld together with how the business or how the organization is actually doing.
Yes. Well, that touches the arena of ethics. As a coach, or of course, if you're dealing with a leader that needs to look and analyze his or her values, is tough in this case because he's the leader and he's influencing as a system to the rest of the system.
Correct.
So what about these values also and roles for coaches dealing with leaders in that ethics arena?
Well, another very good question. I think that people who do work with other human beings in general need to become students of moral reasoning. It's not just, ethics is one subcomponent of a broad field of morals, of values, of moral reason. And it's one of the fields of study that humanity has spent the most time on. So there's a lot to learn about moral reasoning, about morals, about principles, and then about ethics or business ethics as a sub-discipline. If you come to the field of coaching from another discipline, where you've had no exposure to ethics or to moral reasoning, my values are that you should become a student. You should learn some things about morals, about ethics, about moral reasoning. Different professions have evolved codes of ethical conduct that are basically subsets of moral reasoning as applied to their field of activity. And you have to know some deep levels of knowledge about yourself as a human being. Because we are all ethically challenged. We're all morally challenged every day. We make moral judgments every day.
Yeah.
So most people on a day-to-day basis are not aware when they're making a choice, when they're making a decision in their lives or in their business, that choice, that decision has an element or more than one element to it that actually involves moral reasoning. So a leader saying, I'm going to allocate the resources to go and do this, may not realize or may not think about, well, in choosing to do that, I've chosen not to do that, and that may have moral implications for a population. Humanity now is at a point where our technology is such that we are capable and are having massive influence on the entire planet. We all want to live well, we all want to eat well, we all want to see our children do well. And our governments and our business organizations, our social organizations make choices to meet those needs. But those choices that they make, the decisions that they make, have moral implications.
For sure.
And if you're sitting with leaders making those decisions and you're not schooled in systems of moral reasoning and you haven't thought about these issues related to those issues emotionally yourself, you don't know where you stand on those kinds of issues, you may not even hear where the moral issues are when they're in the room. You can have quiet conversations, and sometimes in those conversations what you can see is a little light comes on in the executive's mind and they begin to realize it's not just about the dollars, it's not just about the money, it's also a question of other kinds of values that need to be adjusted vis-a-vis those other values. I think that that's what we can bring, but we need to know personally, professionally what they are. It comes down to the work that we do on a day-to-day basis and to have a professional and personal awareness that when we are called upon to make decisions on behalf of organizations that affect other human beings, we have a moral piece of us that should be consistent. And, you know, I've been in this business for decades. I still read pretty consistently in moral philosophy and moral reasoning. I still get to and look at the research and what's going on and what people are learning about the ways in which human beings either reason or act morally or immorally, because I need to be able to have these conversations first with myself. I need to be able to challenge myself because we are all morally challenged one way or another. And then I need to be able to engage my clients, either individuals or groups, in these kinds of ways. And you need to have the knowledge, and then that connects to another virtue. You also need to have the courage,
of course,
to be able to have those conversations, because those are some of the most difficult conversations that you have with clients.
What do you see for the world of coaching in the next years, in the next coming years?
Well, I think what we're beginning to see is what's happened in most professions, that pioneers come in. They open a new market, they open something that's new. They make a good living at it. They start writing about it. People get interested in it. They start piling in. The market builds. So I think we're going to continue to see a lot of growth. A lot of people coming in that don't know much but are excited about being able to do it. A lot of opportunities for organizations to train and develop people. And a lot of competition for the big organizations and then the middle organizations that have, over the next 10, 15 years, I think that's what you're going to see. Lastly, we're beginning to see universities, academic programs are now becoming, because of all of these other trends, they're now becoming seriously interested in it. So you're going to see degree programs. You're already beginning to see credential programs, certificate programs. I've heard of at least one university in Great Britain that's offering a master's degree, one program that's offering a doctoral degree, As soon as that begins to happen, then there's a front door, then there's a market, and there's all a bunch of things that follow in behind that. But also what follows behind that is you get more research.
Yes.
So that we'll have a better scientific foundation underneath the field and be able to say a lot more about what it can do and what it doesn't.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for being here in our Congress.
My pleasure, believe me.
I hope you visit us again in the future.
Well, I'd be delighted to.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.